looking at the producer's goals, like, is that to increase revenue, whether it's diversification? Is it reducing costs? Are they feeling the bite of that? Or is it market reach, or something more simple and specific, like just increasing their butterfat percentage, whether it's feed conversion ratios from a feedlot side, or better utilization of pasture from a grazier side. So understanding their goals, but then from there, that's where we evaluate and kind of say, okay, but what are your animals telling me about what you're trying to achieve? Is that aligned? What is your feed inventory on hand? Is that aligned? And your financial goals and applications of infrastructure. So really just connecting the dots between like the animals, the resources, and the business goals of the operation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Wisenetix Podcast episode. As always, we're having amazing people here with us. Today is no different. Today, we're going to be interviewing Georgia Adams. She's ruminant nutrition consultant at Grand Valley Fortifiers, and she's going to be sharing a little bit more about her story, her experiences, especially in cattle consultancy, and things that have some influence in her work, like communication and reading customers, and a lot of other cool insights. Georgia, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Ricardo. I'm really excited for our chat today. Appreciate it.
We're excited to have you here. And well, Georgia, we always like to start with a quick introduction from our guest speakers. So if you can share a little bit about us, and don't forget to mention you're from Australia, one of my favorite places in the world. So
I appreciate the shout out. Yeah, so I grew up in southwest Western Australia. So I feel like when most people visit Australia, they go to the East Coast. The West is kind of like the Alberta in Canada. It's very vast. We have a lot of natural resources. But I grew up there in a rural community, and we did have a small farm, interest in dairy, both grazing and intensive livestock. So I did grow up around that. It's always been a big part of my life, but also into travel. So it wasn't really until I traveled that I knew ag was for me, and kind of got to see systems in other countries. And I noticed how much I noticed agriculture. So yeah, it was always science for me, but the whole ag space was really solidified for me when I traveled. And then, went to school, studied ag in Australia, got into the animal side of things. Agronomy really wasn't for me. I've always loved animals. So that was the space I went into, and worked at a dairy through uni, and kind of fell into a job out in the wheat belt of Western Australia. So that's like our big intensive agricultural area, both for livestock and cropping. So fell into a job there. And in terms of how I got to Canada and became a consultant, I kind of fell into consulting really. Just every day farmers were coming in. I think I was 18, 19 at the time, asking me what to drench their sheep with, what to feed their cattle with. And I was like, do not have a specialist for this. Like, I feel like you shouldn't be trusting me with this. And we really did have a lack of livestock consultants back home. We had a lot of agronomic consultants. So that was something I kind of pushed within my company and built the role there. And then was lucky enough to get the opportunity to come over to Canada. So now I work in Alberta doing that predominantly with cattle. And I love it so far. It's just, helping guys and seeing cows every day. And it's great.
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to go to the western side of Australia. I'll be there again in March next year, hopefully. Well, in 2025, I'm not sure when we're releasing this, but yeah, that's a place that I definitely want to visit. I have a few friends around there.
That's beautiful. It's just far, I feel. So a lot of people don't make the trek across.
Perth is one of the cities, like most distant cities in the world, like far from other, if not the most distant city, far like from other big cities. So
definitely, you feel that in every aspect too.
Probably. You have this interesting background in with livestock and agriculture. So I believe there's good influence from your parents in that. I think that's an easy question for you. Like, could your parents describe what you do? Are they able to do this? How would they describe what you do?
I think for sure, like my dad comes to mind first. Obviously, I grew up working livestock with him. But I know for a fact he's just memorized my roles over the years. Like he's memorized ruminant nutrition consultant now to tell anyone that'll listen. So he's super proud. My family's never cared what I did. They've just always been proud of the extra extent I've gone in the industry because I am so passionate about it. So I think Dad would just say my role, and then if someone really like pushed the envelope, he has no idea really. I think he knows I help farmers. I think he knows I provide advice on how to, make their operation more efficient, but he's never really taken my advice well since I was young. And I am quite a young consultant, right? Like I've only been consulting for 7 years. So I actually find it easier to convince like a 20,000 head feedlot of a strategy we should be implementing than my dad with one of our sheep. So he's very stubborn, typical father figure, but I think, they're really proud of me. They kind of understand what I do in that I help farmers, but beyond that, I think they're happy for me.
I think that's the most important thing, as long as they are supporting us, right?
I agree. Yeah. They've always been great like that. Never had any pressure on myself. So I feel like that's let me find my passion naturally.
And Georgia, so looking at your role today as a consultant, the work you're doing in Canada with Grand Valley, let's start with talking a little bit about Grand Valley. Can you share a little bit more about the work you're doing and how the company supports the cattle industry?
It's actually really exciting. I kind of just fell into the position here, and it's been such a great company to work for. So Grand Valley Fortifiers were founded actually back in 1960 by Jim Ross, and now it's actually run by his two sons who've kind of carried on their father's legacy after his passing. So from the start, they've just kind of been focused on all animals. So they do beef, dairy, poultry, and swine, and it's all about fortifying nutrition. So customized from formulation, delivery, but really their focus is more on, and definitely more recently too, really focusing on how we can make the smaller farmer sustainable up to the larger scale farmer sustainable. And not in a fluffy environmental way, but in that we are a very competitive industry and efficiency is more important than ever with our growing population, where you just have to keep getting more and more efficient. And with costs where they are, I know we have a good margin at the moment with beef prices being quite attractive, but it's still ever important to make sure we're kind of providing a tailored service. So I think the difference with them is in their values, in their approach, and their willingness to kind of take a step back and look at how they are aligned with the client, if they're aligned with the client, and that way we have a more effective working relationship with them, I feel.
So let's touch your approach. I think that's one important thing. Last time when we met, you shared a little bit more about this and how you guys have this holistic consultancy approach at Grand Valleys. Can you share with our audience, how does that work? Which type of approach is this?
Yep. So I think you could say it's like holistic consultancy, which sounds really fluffy, but it's just about taking a step back and saying, okay, we don't just have a product and a little niche to fill. We're not going to just supply this product. It's really about understanding the producer's goals, coming in with an outside perspective, which for me, it's about as outside as you can get, being all the way back in Australia, but there's certainly a lot of parallels in the industry. So looking at the producer's goals, like, is that to increase revenue, whether it's diversification? Is it reducing costs? Are they feeling the bite of that? Or is it market reach, or something more simple and specific, like just increasing their butterfat percentage, whether it's feed conversion ratios from a feedlot side or better utilization of pasture from a grazier side. So understanding their goals, but then from there, that's where we evaluate and kind of say, okay, but what are your animals telling me about what you're trying to achieve? Is that aligned? What is your feed inventory on hand? Is that aligned? And your financial goals and applications of infrastructure. So really just connecting the dots between like the animals, the resources, and the business goals of the operation. So yeah, kind of taking a step back, and we're not just like nutritionists, we really do provide that consultancy approach and make sure all decisions made on that operation are viable for the sustainability of the business. I know it sounds fluffy, but I think that's how we need to approach the industry going forward. You kind of have to expand, find your niche, or do it really efficiently to survive. It's very competitive.
No, it doesn't sound fluff for me, at least.
Good.
So basically, we're talking about seeing the big picture, right? Seeing the big picture, and then based on that, acting targeted according to their challenges, their pains, and their objectives.
Yeah, and making sure they're aligned to that too, right? Like if they're telling me they want to increase revenue, but they have a low cost model operation, then that's not really reflecting in their production goals to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So having an understanding of that, and it certainly comes with time and education and practice. So we're all constantly learning and evolving too.
When you're visiting these producers, these farmers, and evaluating their operations, their business through this holistic lens, what are the key factors you consider to provide comprehensive recommendations, recommendations that will bring them value and help them achieving their objectives?
Well, I'm a ruminant nerd. So for me, I think as ruminant producers, again, whether you're on the dairy side, whether you're on feedlot or grazier, we're just grass growers at the end of the day. Our production goal is to convert plant material, 1 pound of plant material into 1 pound of saleable product, whether that's meat, milk, or fiber. And our goal as a consultant is to come in and say, how do we do that in the most efficient way possible? And that's really where we're going to get our most productive, most profitable business. So kind of taking a step back from that and saying, how are we currently doing that? And what are your specific goals? So if it's meeting market weights, is our feeding program in line with that? Is our inventory on hand in line with that? Is our cost of gain quite achievable? Or is there room for improvement there, and actually making sure the market specifically that we're targeting are actually the best ones for our type of cattle, our quality, our grade. So that would be a specific example from feedlotting, but really stepping back and making sure, that the recommendation is grounded in their purpose of profitability. So whether it's return on investment, deciding whether to buy another bin for storage of feed, does that return? Whether they're deciding to go to a custom micro machine, does that return? Is that aligned with what they need to do, or can they achieve that in a lower cost, high profit model? So again, just looking from a why perspective and then drilling down into little minute aspects of their business, whether it's herd health, feed, infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So basically the key factors will depend on what they want to accomplish. That's the first thing. Understand their objectives, and then you can see what are the factors, the things that can influence that outcome that they are looking after.
Yeah, and it can be overwhelming too, right? I think we can get signaled in on certain things, believe in certain technology, and another job of ours really is there is so much information out there. How do we filter that down and apply it? So, for example, like if a rancher really loves alfalfa hay, but is that the feed inventory that's going to sustain his different classes of stock? That really depends on the individual grower. So it is quite a tailored thing, particularly in ruminants, just how they are.
You mentioned, yes, particularly in ruminants. Although your focus today is 100% cattle, you had some experience working in other industries like swine and poultry. How do you think that the consultancy approach, not only the consultancy, but an overview, how do you compare those industries? What are the main differences when you compare, especially ruminants to monogastrics or cattle versus swine and poultry?
I want to preface I'm definitely a ruminant nerd once again, so I won't say that I understand the swine and poultry industry to the same extent. I know the company I work for does, and that's why we specialize, right? We can't know everything about everything. But for me, if I look at a ruminant, if we look at a cow, obviously they're adorable, but they are the only structure of animal. They have the unique digestive system that allows them to digest cellulose. So that really takes really undigestible products, low fibers, byproducts, and low quality forages, and they're able to utilize them. So it's much more of a dynamic conversation rather than a stringent strategic feeding plan like you would with pigs. For us with cows, it's observing what resources we have. So can we feed byproducts to reduce feed costs? Is that going to help us get to our production goals? Utilizing that on an intensive level. So in the dairy and the feedlot space, we're not just select to these few parts we can utilize. Cows started as stewards of the land, and I do still think they are. And for us in the intensive space where they're not grazing, it comes down to how do we utilize the lower quality feeds and the byproducts that other animals can't. Because I think sustainably moving forward, that's really where we need to target it and kind of change the public perception of cattle. I mean, even from a grazier perspective, if we look at grazing land in Canada, I recently did a little bit of research for a presentation I have upcoming. every hectare of land grazed or grassland in Alberta, every hectare is the equivalent sequestration of carbon to 150 passenger cars for a year. So I think we really need to change the framework with that people see cattle through in a sustainability lens to we can actually utilize them in a way we can't with other like a monogastric, because we do have that really cool, unique digestive system where we can harness cellulose. And I do think there's going to be a shift in the industry. We kind of saw it back home where we move from our like higher grain diets across to utilizing protein as we see a shift in global markets and commodity prices. And the way we do that is through utilizing byproducts and fiber. So not trying to get too nerdy, but I think the short answer, I always say short story long because I love a chat.
Please do it. We're here to listen. So
it's a lot more dynamic, I feel. And no, like absolutely, I understand the tech. It's very technical. I'm not saying that poultry and swine isn't, but we approached it a little bit differently with a ruminant because we can utilize byproduct markets. We can look at local plants. I know I work in the south, so we've got things like potatoes and beet pulp. We can use reject screenings at a lower cost, sometimes free. I mean, I've fed carrots to feedlot cattle and had incredible results, and we just saved them from being chucked in a hole in the ground and wasted. So there's a lot of untapped potential there. So from a consultancy perspective, I do think we really need to look at it a little bit weirdly and dynamically and utilize what we have around us rather than stick to a regime. And there's certainly a place for both. And that is also me putting my consultant hat on and taking the nutritionist cap off is we need to see where that makes sense for the operation too. So dynamically thinking, but if the stringent strategic feeding programs apply for economic and market, that's what we need to be doing. So it does give us a little bit of wiggle room to be weird, which I love.
That's really interesting, especially like the impact on sustainability as you shared, being able to adapt things according to the environment where you are, what you have available, the resources, the usage of byproducts. That's very nice.
Yeah.
You're a cattle nerdy. You really like it. I mean, and we can see you know a lot about it. But in a consultancy work, involves a lot of communication, right? It's being there with the farmer, with the producer, talking to them, understanding. So communication is a big piece here. How do you do to deal with different customer profiles in terms of personality, adapting your communication to different customer profiles, but also not only personality, but how they see things, right? You might have someone that is really looking after innovation and new solutions, trying to be creative, and at the same time, you might visit this customer in the morning. In the afternoon, you might be talking to someone that is conservative, that is worried about changing how they do things and adapting their work. So how do you shift this? How do you read a customer profile? Which tools do you use to communicate with them?
Yeah, so we've established I've kind of always been interested in the science part of it. And for me, psychology has always been a part of that. So I think over the years, I've always looked into and been very interested in different personality types, and just coming from my own frustration of whether it's been my sister or a colleague, just really struggling to connect with them or understand how their brain works. I think even from a relationship perspective, we can all understand sometimes you just wish you were on the same level as your spouse. So on a industry level and in consulting over the years, that's kind of evolved for me, starting from like in high school, they teach you like brown, red, blue, yellow, and green for personality types. So for me, I love to keep up to date with different ways to approach clients. So even more recently, like theories like Thomas Erickson's surrounded by idiots. That sounds very offensive, but it's really just a provocative way of saying, I'm so frustrated because I don't understand or connect with the people around me. Why can't they just do work the way I do work? So I think for me, understanding that not everyone's brain works like mine was a really big thing. And just being respectful too. Like I have a lot of passion, obviously, and enthusiasm coming in. So kind of just targeting my approach to respect the client, respect their business and their approach. So for me, an example would be if you go to what Thomas would say is a red person, very driven, very results orientated. Now, dominant, right? So me coming in really enthusiastic is not going to sail off across well. Or if I'm up for a chat, a 2-hour chat and a coffee and a cake, that's usually not what they're looking for. So if it was in a feedlot setting, you would come prepared with results-driven data. So the data, the suggested changes, how we implement them, the time frame, and the return on investment. They will want the process and proof of what the results will be. They don't want the fluff, just getting to the point and understanding that they are very results-driven. So also reading body language in that. It definitely comes into, are they checking their watch? Are they interested? Are they invested in the conversation? And that looks different with each personality type too. So I think red's always a good example because you come in with a plan, the data to back it, and the expected outcome, and you're usually on the same page. And I think that's our job, is to kind of bridge that gap between the information and all the industry chatter and then what's actually going to be applicable on their farm for success, and doing that in a way that translates their personality. So for red, hard and fast is usually the approach.
Don't waste their time, be objective, and yeah.
I love to chat.
You're a yellow one, probably.
I am very impatient though, so I'd say I'm a little bit red too, for sure. But I'm very, very empathetic. So, yeah, yellow too.
I'm a yellow one. I think I'm yellow and green. I mean, I cannot recall.
I would say that.
Yeah, it's yellow primary, very sociable, like talking. But yeah, a little bit about me. And what do you think are the most common personality types you encounter when you're meeting with producers, and how do you approach to build long-term relationship with them?
Yeah, so I think over the years this has definitely changed, like my perspective as I've got more experience. People will probably laugh at that because I am pretty young, but I think the more you're in the industry, the more a feel you get for the people. So for me, I think anyone that's farming, whether it's inherited or not, you do have to have some level of introvertism to be working with yourself all day. But there is still the people you come across that are very, very seeking of human connection. So those people you definitely take the time to build. And I love those people too, because I love a chat and I love connecting, and I truly care about every client I come across. So I think there is a mix, to be honest. You would expect it to be a certain type of person, but I think that mix comes with some is inherited, second, third, fourth generation, and others are, new to the industry, started up by themselves. And those people usually coincide with red because they're very natural born leaders, they're results driven, and you need to start a farm from scratch here. I mean, I've looked into it and I would love to do that, but it's a long process. So you get those. I think when we talk about grazier producers, I know my dad would definitely fall into green. He's very calm and content with everything. So change is very frightening and needs to be justified at his own pace. So, I think just knowing the crowd. If it's yellow, have a chat. If it's green, take it easy. If it's red, go guns a-blazing, as a very generic. But the key is respect their pace, their type, and that's how you build a relationship, because understanding someone shows that you respect them and that you actually want the best for their business too. So not just superficially going and say, oh, he's red, I'm going to, but actually saying, I wonder why he's red. I wonder how I can adjust to help him get where he can faster, which I don't even know if that's possible with a red person. So driven, but I hope that answers the question. I think it's just making sure they feel comfortable with you, and that looks different for the different types, right? So that's something I've had to adjust to, because I get very excited and then I can come in and scare someone. With practice, I would say anyone new watching, it's a process.
Absolutely. And so you read them, you adapt your approach according to their profile. And if you think about communication as a toolbox, do you have any communication techniques that you use? They can be targeted to specific profiles or broader that you can use, with anyone. But, tools to facilitate your communication, to help you understand their real needs and provide solutions accordingly.
Yeah, I think there's one that comes to mind straight away from me, and it's definitely applied to me the most just because of my color and my personality type as a consultant. Everyone's different. A generic one I think that can apply to all personality types is active listening. So asking open-ended questions and kind of letting them tell you their perspective on their operation, on their struggles, on their goals, and then challenging it where it is applicable to. But that's really that few milliseconds before it turns into an awkward silence. Someone's got to feel that, and it shouldn't always be you. Sometimes it should be the client, because that's when they will come across something they might not have if you haven't given them the space to think. So that's kind of in line with what I said before, just kind of respecting their pace. But I think we just need to remember to listen more as consultants. We have all this information. We really are passionate about expressing, and we know we can hopefully help the client. But how can you really help them if you don't understand their perspective first? So active listening would be the one I found has been a skill that's really helped me connect and understand a business.
Especially as a consultant, yes, like
Sounds simple, but I think
it sounds basic. Like it can sound basic as like, hey, yeah, of course you should be listening when you're talking to someone, but in reality, especially I think when we are like, if you're with your friends and family, you know everyone, you're very comfortable with it, we can a lot of times get into like autopilot and just like ask things, do not really concentrate, and just, I don't know, best word, vomit your words and what you think and your opinions, and you're not actually like listening to them. It is basic in concept, but applying and having this as a skill, as something that is part of your communication, it's something to be conquered, in my opinion. I struggled to really get to the point where I was like, hey, wait, I'm talking here. I don't need to be thinking about what's the next thing I'm gonna say. I need to listen, really understand where I am, who I'm talking with, and to take the most of it. So it's definitely a good and important skill.
I think so. And it allows other things to come through, right? Like it gives you time to establish their body language, to analyze how the meeting's going, to observe the animals, to look around and observe their feed inventory, other aspects, dynamics within the family, if it's a family-run business. So I still obviously struggle with it, but I think it's something worth practicing. Active listening is different too than just listening. It's making sure the person feels heard and understood, it's all about respect in consulting, in my opinion, especially coming in as a younger generation. Some of these guys have been farming for 50 years. So for them to listen to me is already a hurdle, and they should be extremely proud that they are open to listening to such a young opinion. So we need to be respectful of that.
People love to talk. So when you're asking the questions and putting them in the spot where they are sharing their thoughts, well, most of if you want to build a relationship fast and start, connecting with the people, make sure that you put them to talk. They will feel like, hey, well, I met this great person. We talked a lot, and at the end, like, you were mostly asking questions and putting them to speak. So
yeah, and it gives them time to think. And even if they're not a big talker, it gives them time to think. So like it works both ways. Like I know a lot of growers aren't huge talkers, but when it comes to their business, they usually want any opinion if they're thinking about it the right way. So
and finally, last question here on our business talk. If you had to give one piece of advice to someone starting in consultancy, maybe in cattle consultancy, what would that be?
I think for me, it's curiosity. So you don't necessarily have to come in like raised on a farm. But if you come into the industry with an open mind and curiosity, I think it can take you a long way. So not having like predetermined assumptions or perspectives, but kind of saying, I want to know how that works, but not just on a level of where you need to know. So I think sometimes I could get carried away with that. But overall, I think always being willing to learn, understand you don't know everything ever. Like I learn every single day as a consultant, whether it's, you're at coffee for a morning meeting and you learn how to make a new Dutch pastry, or whether it's, oh, I actually didn't know that. And I think particularly with the older generation, and my pop particularly taught me a lot of this, of observing stock, cow sense, feed sense, just really like left field weird analogies that they would have even for pasture management. Like if it's a beer cap tall, it's okay to graze cattle on. So I think always being open to weird opinions depending if they come from your dad or not, whether you listen. But I think we need to try, right? So I think that allows us to have a holistic eye and to kind of take a step back, because if we're curious about something, it means we want to understand it inside out. That's a big one for me. And I think too, particularly young consultants coming in, there's not a lot of us, but we need to be okay with feeling like an imposter all the time. I think imposter syndrome is just something you're always going to have when you're advising someone, particularly in scale. But the thing that's important to remember is, do I have the ability to provide a new perspective, or one that will make this operation 1% better? Can I provide value to that person? And that, I think, it just gives you that drive. But you're always going to feel like you don't know as much as the next person, but that's what makes you successful, because you will always try and be playing catch up, which if you're passionate, it's fun. So find something you're passionate about, be curious about it, and believe in yourself. But don't be overconfident either. I think that's something too.
Those are good advices. Georgia, any books, movies, podcasts, documentaries that you'd like to suggest for our listeners? And they can be about anything you find interesting.
I think personal. So also, I've got so many recommendations. How long have you got? I'm that person. I think I don't want a shameless plug, but I do actually love the Beef Podcast show, both like the Nutrition Black Belt and the main one, as well as the Dairy Podcast show, which you guys produce. So just a little shout out there. But I think any podcasts, any different perspectives. I watch Diary of a CEO. Am I a billionaire? Not even a thousandaire, but I will listen to that and always find a new perspective of someone from a left field industry that I don't understand, but it might apply in some way to my career or my personal life. So I think always be open to listening to new stuff. There's always the boring recommendation, no offense to anyone, of NRC, NASM. I think that's a great document just to give us a guide on a nutrition standpoint of where we can go with cattle. And even for anyone wanting to learn more about the industry, it's a great resource. Locally, the Rural Woman podcast I love. That's actually one produced in Alberta by a local farmer's wife who came into the industry. So I think the main thing I want to get across for guys and girls listening is be open to the ag industry. Make sure you're educated and have an understanding. I think public perception is one of the most important things for us as an industry moving forward, and understanding that cows do play a role in sustainability. They play a role in alleviating food waste and pressure. So yeah, I think anything that has ag in the title, I would encourage people to read it.
The curiosity skill, right? For
sure.
Advice, not skill. No, that's awesome. Georgia, thank you so much for the great conversation. It was great for me to learn a little bit more about the cattle industry, especially in Canada, and how you guys approach it, especially with all the psychological perspective on, relationship building and connecting with people. I'm sure that the audience that is here with us now is also enjoying. So last question, actually, where can our listeners find you online if anyone wants to connect?
Yeah, great. Just want to say thank you so much for the platform too. Any opportunity I get to chat about what the industry is doing, where it's moving, is really exciting. And getting to connect people on the psychology level, I feel like it gives us a little bit of a connection no matter what industry we're in. So I really appreciate the time. I'm trying to be good at LinkedIn, but I'm actually terrible. I am on there. My name's Georgia Adams. And then my work email, you can always reach me on. That's one I'm always checking. It's just georgiaadams@grandvalley.com. So always happy if you have any questions about the industry, about consulting, any of the references I referred to. Want to get in contact, just have a chat. Always up for it. So thanks again, Ricardo. It's been really great.
It's been awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for the insights. And for our listeners, thank you for your company, for staying with us. And I hope to see you all on our next episode.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.